All right, Big Bang. Today's Tuesday. It's August 24th. Welcome to the Dog Walk presented by Barstool Sports. Chief, how we doing?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
Good. Tinfoil Tuesday. Feel like the last couple have really been heating up. So
Yeah, I think this one's a little bit hot as well,
Really?
too. Yeah.
what do we got?
Well, this is it's called Operation Timber Sycamore, which we've done a few of these type of CIA things in the past, going back to like Operation Paperclip to get, I think that was the one to get the Nazi like rocket scientists into the United States. There's obviously the
Northwoods.
Operation Northwoods, the Cuban Missile Crisis, Operation Mongoose, all these different kind of interventionalist policies by the United States that have funded and backed different foreign conflicts. We've done a lot of these because there's a lot to do. There's been a lot to do. We did a whole show about just like some of these failed wars or dumbest wars ever, and there were a few listed there. And this is probably the most recent one, I would guess, maybe that's been declassified and talked about. And it's called Operation Timber Sycamore, and it has to do with the United States involvement and intervention in Syria, really starting in like 2012, and then it kind of wrapped up in 2017. But it really goes back a long ways.
All right, I kind of remember when all that stuff was happening.
It was like the what would say, the drums of war were banging.
Yeah,
Obama talking about red lines, a giant international crisis. You had ISIS going on in Iraq at about the same time, so we had like things were heating up there. It was a very chaotic time, and it seems like there's just been a lot of just different misinformation about what actually transpired, and maybe some of the motivations for those is where it gets a little bit tinfoily, and we can talk about that.
Okay, let's do it. Before we get into it, though, I do want to talk about Miller Lite here, Chief. We're recording on Monday. Did you enjoy some great tasting, less fillings this past weekend?
I actually did. I've been trying to get some rollerblading in. I rollerbladed into work today. I actually went from my house to Declan's yesterday afternoon, stopped by, sat there, had a couple of great tasting, less filling Miller Lights outside of the patio. It was great. And it is like that type of thing where it's when you've been doing a little bit of work in, you're outside, it's hot, nothing makes you feel as refreshed as a Miller Lite.
You were taking a sip, looking up, seeing a blue angel fly over.
Couldn't ask for more. It was
nice
absolutely beautiful. Then I just had, I had one to go. So you're just rolling around, just enjoying the city. It's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, Miller Lite's been the light beer with great taste since 1975, and obviously it's just an easy choice for us.
Yeah, I love it. It is like you asked me, did I have any this past weekend? I have some basically every weekend, responsibly, of course.
There you go.
Yeah.
So next time you're getting ready to enjoy cold ones with your crew, go to MillerLite.com/redline to find the delivery options near you. Or you can pick up some Miller Lite pretty much anywhere that they sell beer. It's Miller time. Celebrate responsibly. Miller Brewing Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. 96 calories and 3.2 carbs per 12 ounces. All right, Chief. Let's hop into it here.
All right. So as I said, this is not like some, speculation, bullshit, whatever. This is like declassified documents that anybody can pull up on the internet and find and research. And so it's not like any like political statement or talking about anything like that. This is just hardcore facts that are readily available to anybody who wants them. And this Operation Timber Sycamore, like I said, goes back to 2012, and they think there's some misconception or murkiness about when the actual start date for this program was, but they know it was at least proposed in 2012. So if you remember around that time, we had all sorts of unrest in the Middle East. Obviously, we had been there for a long time. We had been in Afghanistan. We had been in Iraq. But that was, the Arab Spring was going on. So that started in Tunisia. It went to Libya. We saw Gaddafi fall. Saw Gaddafi fall. And this was like we have regime change happening all over the Middle East, Mubarak in Egypt, and it felt like Syria was ripe. Like they were the next ones, that they had been living under Assad, and Assad's father, Bashar al-Assad, was the son who is the current still president of Syria, and deemed, like I would say, kind of like an enemy of the state, of the United States and the Western world. And there was pressure put on Mubarak, and obviously there was intervention that happened in Libya to get rid of Gaddafi, and by France and others. This was kind of our thing, that we were going to put on pressure to get Assad to either step down or knock him out. And we saw Syria really fall into complete chaos, where you had a refugee crisis, you had there's differing degrees of certainty about what happened regarding chemical and biological weapons used by Bashar al-Assad against his own people, and that was the red line that Obama drew that said he cannot cross it. And then allegedly they used sarin gas and other things against their own people, but then that's been widely disputed. So
I remember seeing those videos on Twitter,
right, they looked horrible.
That's
right?
what I thought it was.
Yeah, so did I. And then, but as time has gone on, there's been people being like, well, when you look at like the people treating them in the hospital, because it like can affect your skin and like it can enter your body all sorts of different ways, that you really need like a hazmat suit. So there were like the images that were coming out of there of the people that were impacted by the sarin gas, then they were treated by people who were just like walking around like normal civilians and doctors. So it was there's differing opinions about what was used, who actually used it, was it what was used, who, when, all that kind of stuff, that maybe it was not the best, but that to maybe wasn't like as certain as you would need to invade Syria over that red line, because the waters have been muddied about where that gas came from, who used it, and why. Was
there anything else though that you could kind of like lay a little bit more foundation, if you know about the two leaders and why everyone wanted them to be overthrown?
Well, we're gonna get to that.
Okay.
We're gonna get into that because. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, because you were just saying, I'm like, okay, I didn't, me myself was not educated enough about like what the big deal was.
Right, and if you remember, do you remember who came to Bashar al-Assad's aid to keep him in power in Syria?
I don't.
Vladimir Putin in Russia.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so it was kind of, Putin was backing Syria, and we were backing the Syrian rebels, trying to overthrow him. And we were doing it through this program and political pressure and other things like not necessarily like basically what would you call it, like an economic blockade? Like we're not trading with you. We have all these international sanctions trying to make life very difficult on that regime. And this was initially this program, this Operation Timber Sycamore, was initially proposed by David Petraeus. Do you remember that name?
I don't.
So David Petraeus, he was head of the CIA at the time, but he was the main general in charge of the surge when, late 2007, when the United States put more troops into Iraq and really kind of settled down that insurgency from when it was, they had AQI. AQI was Al-Qaeda in Iraq. And that was, if you've seen the movie American Sniper, and that was kind of like around that era when he oversaw this big surge in troops and the way that we were fighting. Him and General Stanley McChrystal were like the two, head honchos in charge of that, and were celebrated for doing a pretty good job there.
Okay.
So Petraeus then, leaves the army and gets a job running the CIA. He was the head of the CIA under Obama, and he pitches this program, which was initially going to train Syrian rebels, and then to help them try to topple Assad. But that project was initially rejected by Obama, and then Obama got a call from Israel. It was Benjamin Netanyahu was the prime minister of Israel at the time. He wanted to do this. The King Abdullah of Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Qatar. So all those people were like, yeah, like we're going to do this. So the kind of strange bedfellows.
Oh, yeah.
I would say. Because Saudi Arabia, they don't particularly like Israel, but they're all kind of working together. Almost reminds you, if you've seen Charlie Wilson's War, Tom Hanks, it goes back to the 80s where we were all working together, mostly those countries working together to fund the Mujahideens fight in Afghanistan against the Soviet Union in the 80s. So they were, funding weapons because you couldn't just, you have to kind of keep, if you're doing covert operations, you don't want to say like, hey, the United States is actively involved in this war, right? Mm-hmm. So you can't just be like, here's an M16. Can't do that. Here's a our style of a rocket launcher. Can't do that. It has to be weapons made somewhere else, bought by someone else, delivered by somebody else, while the United States is funding some of it, orchestrating all of it, and they're in charge, but they have to have like plausible deniability. So, like the main weapons deal, or one of the main weapons deals, was struck in Croatia. Okay, so it's like you have all the principal parties, but the deal's done in Croatia. The guns and the ammo and stuff is shipped to Jordan, which is a neighboring country. And then from there, it gets delivered to Syrian rebels who are fighting Assad. So it's all this kind of convoluted thing, okay? And but then, once Obama had initially rejected, he talks to all these different heads of state, gets a little pressure, he signs off on it, and that's when the scope of it changed to the point where it became like a major program in the CIA. And the quote was that this was the center of the U.S.'s policy to remove Assad. So we put everything we had into this to the tune of like hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars into this program. Really? It was ran from, like I said, 2012, and then Trump kind of scaled it down and eventually phased it out completely by the end of 2017.
Yeah, when you Google it, I mean, the first thing it says, behind the sudden death of a $1 billion secret. So, I don't know.
There you go. Yeah. So, but yeah, it was the centerpiece of that whole administration's push to get rid of this guy. And like I said, it had the strange bedfellows, and then it had Putin on the other side. And it's like, this is where things, it always makes me nervous about the government and some of these things. Maybe it's just a product of the times that we were brought up in, where, we see Colin Powell get up in front of the UN, and he's, do you remember that? Do you remember being in high school for that?
I don't.
Okay, actually. So pre-Iraq invasion in 2003, Colin Powell is, I believe he's the Secretary of State or Secretary of Defense under George W. Bush. And he walks up to he gives a speech at the UN as we're trying to like rally people to go into war in Iraq. And he holds up this vial of what he says is chemical and biological weapons, that they have evidence that they're mass producing weapons of mass destruction. I'm sure you remember the WMDs. We got to find the WMDs. Got to find them. They have them. We're going in. We're going to get them. We never found them. But that was the impetus for war. Be like, holy fuck, Saddam Hussein's got this. And that's kind of where the waters get murky about this thing with the sarin gas too, because while it's our involvement in that region going back into the early 90s, the first Gulf War, they say that American will to fight another foreign war with our soldiers in another country in the Middle East, it just didn't have it. So like Obama said, hey, like here's the red line. If they cross it, we're going in. Okay. Well, they crossed it. Okay. At least publicly, that's what the United States and everybody's saying. Oh my God, Assad used sarin gas on his own people. Crossed that line. The American people just did not have the appetite for another war at that point. And this was, I think that was probably 2013 when that was going on. And I don't think people were saying it was for sure a false flag or whatever, but they were just not ready to go in for another foreign war. And then, so they just kept going with this other process where they're funding and they funded as many as 50 different not terrorist groups, I'll say rebel groups. Okay. Mm-hmm. And a lot of those rebel groups had been vetted by and suggested by the Saudi government, who had been funding them for a long time, because the Saudis, and that was like there's a document that's been signed off by Hillary Clinton, who was Secretary of State at the time, that said, hey, like we have these groups that we're vetting. A lot of these groups have come from, the recommendation of the Saudi government, who fund these Sunni militant groups globally all over the world, AKA terrorist groups. Like, do we really want to be giving thousands and thousands of rifles and rocket launchers and all these means of fighting civil war to groups that we don't really have a lot of faith in, trust in, or good faith in, rather. Like, hey, like they might be on our side right now, but as soon as they topple Assad and now we've armed them and trained them, they might just turn those rifles right around and point them at us. That was like a big concern with this operation. And I think you definitely saw some of that with the rise of ISIS in 2014 and 15, when you saw like what was happening with that. And it was like, you see these things on the battlefield, and it's like, why do they have like a lot of American equipment? Well, it's because they got it from Syria, where they were fighting there, and they set up like that caliphate, which was like, there is no Iraq-Syria border. It's just fucking chaos, and ISIS runs it. And they were able to secure a lot of these weapons and ammo that were funded and placed there by the United States to begin with. So it's like fucking insane. And again, this is all like kind of declassified stuff that's just out there that nobody talks about. The thing that doesn't get talked about enough is where it gets a little bit tinfoily, right?
Yeah.
So I said before,
I mean, that sounds like a horrible idea. Excuse.
Go, yeah.
What?
You got to be careful, but that happens all the time.
Yeah.
That happens all the time. And, we've seen it all throughout the 50s, 60s, and 70s in Nicaragua, Cuba, Haiti. We've talked about that in an episode, all the history of Haiti, how fucked up our interventions ended up going there. Same thing, you could say that Vietnam was very much like that, where we started off with like the small operation. Hey, we're training 3 people, and then they have the Gulf of Tonkin. That would be the red line equivalent, which turned out to be a false flag, fake thing. Then we're into Vietnam for hundreds of millions of dollars, thousands of dead Americans, and you could then we've obviously been doing that in other places, and we've seen what happens time and time again when we try to intervene. We don't necessarily have the political will to really stick it out or monitor it, or maybe there's just all kinds of problems, from Afghanistan to Iraq to all these different places all over the world. This has always been an interventionist type of problem. But like I said, the strange bedfellows, this is where my ears kind of perked up. You got Russia with Assad, okay? And I always in my head was like, well, Putin's looking for allies. He's a bad guy. Assad's a bad guy. Bad guys run together, whatever. But then it's like Israel, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Qatar, and us? Like, that's a weird starting.
That's a weird crew.
A weird starting five.
Yeah.
That they're all working together. No one really likes each other. But they're working together to get rid of Assad. And why would they want to get rid of Assad? Any guesses?
No, I don't. That's such a strange.
Right.
Is it a production thing? Is it something that wants something that's supplied there? Is it?
Bingo.
Okay.
Bingo.
Right.
Okay. So back to the dollar. Now, Israel has their own concerns because there's a lot of funding for Hezbollah came out of the Assad people. So they had their hey, stop sending. We want Assad out because he supports Hezbollah. Fine.
Hezbollah, not like the little boxing guy, right?
No, Hezbollah, like the.
I had to clarify.
They're in the PLO.
If you're like me, that's who I think of when I hear Hezbollah.
Yeah. But they're actually just a terrust organization.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, what the fuck, Hezbollah?
Yeah.
That's not a great name, man.
Gotta just switch that up. But yeah, so they're like a terrorist group that, attacks Israel and bombs buses and sends rockets into Palestine to send over. And then we talked about the Iron Dome, how they intercept those. Well, where do they get their rockets? Well, historically, they've gotten a lot of rockets and weapons and bomb making ability from Syria. So Israel's motivations are pretty clear. Okay. But Saudi Arabia and Qatar, what they wanted was a new regime that would allow them to build a pipeline through Syria right to the Mediterranean Sea, and then they can sell oil, gas, and all the other fossil fuels and bring it right to Europe's doorstep, who would be their primary purchaser. Okay, easily. You're not shipping it around Africa. You're not going down through the Red Sea, through the Suez Canal, all that stuff. It is a pipeline, whoosh, right through. So they're going to cut out a lot of overhead and have a cheaper product to bring right to Europe's doorstep, especially Eastern Europe's doorstep. that previously and currently, because Assad is still there, that pipeline does not exist. They get all their oil and gas from
Saudi Arabia.
No, if they can't, they're not getting it from
Russia.
Exactly. So Russia's entire economy is based on basically oil and gas, and they ship that to Russia or to Europe because they border it. They have that huge border. They can build pipelines. They can deliver it right to Europe's
that's why
front
Russia's
door.
with them.
Russia's protecting their oil interests, their economy. That's why they're supporting Assad. We want our United States and our partners, Saudi Arabia and Qatar, they want that pipeline. So it's like a battle over who can supply Europe with electricity, oil, and gas power through fossil fuels. And it's like all drummed up, dressed up, talking hundreds of thousands of people displaced, murdered, killed through this whole thing. And if you really kind of trace it back, and again, it's not that part's where it gets a little tinfoil. It's not exactly sure, but it's like that is something that Qatar and Saudi Arabia wanted, and Russia wanted to block, and we wanted the pipeline too, and our NATO partners wanted the pipeline. We just the American people just wouldn't go along with it at that point. Not because we knew the motivations, but just because goddamn, we've been over there for 15 fucking years already. Let's get out. And then Trump comes in and he kind of they just, that program just didn't work. So they just scaled it down and phased it out completely.
Damn.
Crazy. So you remember how hot that was?
Yeah.
In 13, 14, 15.
And they couldn't have done it without us. I mean, Russia's pretty powerful.
Well, we were on the other side of Russia.
Yeah.
So
I know. That's what I'm saying. If they couldn't have done it, like Qatar and,
probably not. We have the military might. We have, we're the big dog, right?
Yeah.
We're still the United States of America, big dog, the big military. We were going to go in militarily. Hey, you better not cross that red line, that chemical weapons, sarin gas line. Crossed. Okay, we going in? Nah. Okay, so that was, and credit to Obama for being able to I'm sure he was getting all sorts of pressure from all sorts of people. Basically, you better stick to your fucking word and invade Syria and get rid of this fucking guy. And he was just like, the polling data, this and that. It's not like we had a referendum. People didn't want to go in, and so they didn't. And that was basically, they still kept trying to supply these people, but it just became worse and worse and worse because it's who are you supplying? Who are you fighting? People are changing sides all the time. It's just chaotic. It's impossible to know who's in charge and who are the good guys. It's impossible to know who are the good guys on the ground, and if they'll stay good guys after this. So that was really the crux of this. And then it's been phased out, and Assad's still there, and there's no pipeline, and
there's just a bunch of weapons for
just a bunch of
people.
weapons floating around. Yeah.
That doesn't sound like this was a good endeavor.
Probably not.
Jesus.
But it's an interesting story, and it just makes you think about,
Yeah.
It gives you pause when you hear about all these things, all these other things drumming up, and just got to be careful and try to, always. It seems like everything more and more is always about the dollar and what, So if you trace it all the way back, there's usually some financial motivation from somebody, and you got to be careful of that stuff.
Yeah. Well, damn. No, like I said, all I knew was what I saw on Twitter was the videos and how horrifying
it was horrific. And you could say this is on a human rights level.
Yeah.
Forget everything else. We got to do something. It's a humanitarian thing to do. We can't let these people get slaughtered. But it's maybe we're stoking the flames and causing a lot of this problem.
Yeah.
Not to say that Assad is a good guy.
Yeah.
He's certainly not. But it's a bad situation.
Yeah, hearing the allegiances and hearing the pipelines and the goods, and it was interesting. So, thank you for explaining that. Like you said, it's just reporting what's out there. So,
Yep. You can look it up yourself.
Yep. All right, everybody. That's it for today. Thank you, Chief. We'll see you guys tomorrow.